everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's, or this month's rather, DEILC Conversations. We are presenting today on looking forward. And also we are saying a great happy second anniversary to the DEILC. We have now, as of this month, been moving forward for 2 years in RI. And we are very excited to celebrate with y'all today as we talk some about the RI International with the DEILC, where we've been and what we've got going on now, and as we look forward to the future and what we're going to be doing in the months to come. Just a little bit of a reminders here. We do use the chat box for any questions or comments. So if you'd love to ask a question of any of our speakers today, please feel free to use the chat box. I'll be monitoring that for us. My name is Susan Kornett. I am the Programs Director of Cumberland Recovery Response Center in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I serve on the communications pillar of the DEILC. And we are very excited to be having our special guest today. If we can move the slide forward. Thank you. So we have today 3 special guests. We have Miss Akemie Jones. She is the program director of the First Hope, which is Henderson's Recovery Response Center, and we're very excited to have her here. She's also the chair of the DEILC, and she'll be leading the charge today. We have Victor Armstrong joining us. He is our new RI Chief Diversity Officer, and we're looking forward to being able to speak with him, hearing about his vision for the future. And also, as most of you know, we have Dr. Browning, who is RI's Chief Medical Officer, and we look forward to hearing about what's going on with our smart tools and how we can make that work for us and what it means for RI as a culture. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to open the chat box, make sure I can see everything in case anything comes in here. We're going to start with looking back over what we've done over the past year, and we're going to do highlights of DEI conversations that have occurred up to this point. So let's take a moment and go through that slideshow.
I think we have to look beyond anybody's manner of dressing or how they wear their hair. To be able to connect with people, we need to seek their heart and their soul, their kindness, their generosity, the things that we love about them. And that can't be covered by a scarf. Muslims are supposed to be generous, and everyone should be generous, because we are in this world not to just go through the world in our own, this is me, it's all about me, but to be aware of other people and things that are happening in the world where people are vulnerable or at risk, and help them. So we would need to be generous in every way, not just money, but in kindness, in acts of goodness, in helping people, generous with our time and our spirit and our financial situation, everything.
Black women, we've always had to hold it down from day one. And we can talk about how we can look back and see how mental health and suicide, of course, all the things that we have been through as a people, and how that whole trauma and seeing a whole lot of stuff surface, in our country and community in the last, 2 to 5 years have just really brought a lot of things up to surface. And so when you've seen that uptick, I believe that it's because of things that we have not talked about, things that we have not addressed, not only in our communities in our country, but also in our homes. We have not had these conversations in our community of color because we were, I'm speaking for myself now, but as I talk to other, people from around the country, those are conversations that we never had because we don't do that. We go to clergy or we keep it in the family. We put it under the rug. We put it under blood and we keep it moving. But we know that as we put stuff under the rug and as we continue to stuff that rug that was flat now becomes, it becomes a stumbling block. And before you know it, we're tripping all on it.
We have to remember, deafness separates us from people. So deaf people by nature either are looking to connect, looking to be a part of, and they just can't quite do it because that's where that ability and the ability and the inclusion really comes in for them and for us. One of the questions is, does a virtual meeting cause challenges? And the answer is maybe, but I'm a nerd, so usually when I meet, I usually have I have a captioning thing on my phone, and so I can use that. I can always use the captioning on the phone. So I usually use, and then I'm usually the one to say, did I hear that right? So one of my strengths is that I'm pretty assertive. I thankfully work with people who are like, RI, who's extremely generous and valuable with their understanding.
I dream a world where man, no other man will scorn, where love will bless the earth, and peace's path adorn. I dream a world where all, with no sweet freedom's way, greed no longer saps the soul, no avarice blights our day. A world I dream with black or white, wherever race you be, will share the bounties of the earth and every man is free. Where wretchedness will hang his head and joy like a pearl attends the needs of all mankind. Of such I dream, my world.
My world.
What a beautiful review. Thank you so much. And that's just highlights of what we've been able to accomplish, the conversations we've had, the celebrations we've had, the education that we've incorporated into the RI culture over the past year. I put a message in the chat box, just welcoming everyone, just reminding you if you do have any questions for any of the presenters, please feel free to put those in there. And let's just remember that we'll take turns, and this is a conversation. We're going to honor everybody's questions and insights and opinions, and we'll just make sure that we do that in the DEI way. So we are going to start with my good friend, Ms. Akemie Jones. And Ms. Akemie is going to be starting with us today talking about, as the chair of the DEILC, what the DEILC is and what is it comprised of? What is our mission? How do we get started? So Ms. Akemie Jones, please get us started today. Welcome, and let us hear from you.
Absolutely, let's get into it, team. So like she said, this is a conversation. We're wanting to hear from you all. This is a council that is built to, as all of our councils, we're built to serve you all better, to serve our community better, and having these conversations just allows us to do so. So let's get right into it. Why is diversity, equity, and inclusion so important? Why do we care? So when a company is fully invested in DEI, it allows the staff within the company to feel heard and seen because the company has created and fostered an environment where each person is valued for their unique perspectives, skills, and talents. As employees, they're all treated respectfully and they feel able to communicate openly. It's a space where staff are encouraged to develop to their full potential as a contributor to the success of the company but also to the communities that we serve. So DEI is very important in everything that we do. So the DEI Council was formed exactly 2 years ago. So yay, to our 2-year anniversary. It was established 2 years ago as a result of a lot of the social injustices, not that they weren't happening beforehand, but everyone knew there was a huge blow up about 2 years ago. And as a company, we decided to take a stand and ensure that we were providing a space and support for our staff and the guests that we serve. I say it time and time again, whatever happens in our communities will always make its way into our services, into our programs. And as staff, we are humans before we are staff members. So these are things that were impacting all of us. They still are impacting all of us today. And RI really wanted to be in a position to ensure that we are doing as a company the best we can to meet those needs. And so we started 2 years ago. We had a consultant by the name of Dr. Beverly Muhammad. Awesome woman. She created the DEI Council at Amex. And so she came on board with us to really assist us in laying our foundation. This was something new. And so we wanted to make sure that if we're stepping out there to do it, that we're doing it the right way. And so she really assisted us in getting organized, getting our structure. So we have our core council members, which are comprised of some of the executive leadership, as well as some of your program leaders. The job of those individuals are to remove the barriers for our cultural champions and support squad members that also assist with the council. The job of the council is to really get the engagement, at least that has been our focus for the past 2 years, is getting employee engagement, making sure that staff know who we are, know that we're here, having these educational conversations around diversity, equity, inclusion, because sometimes there's this kind of thought that diversity, equity, inclusion is strictly race, and it's not. There's so many things that can make a person diverse, seen and unseen. And so that has been really one of our biggest focuses over the past 2 years. It's introducing DEI to the company. We send out these surveys, the pulse surveys that a good portion of you have participated on, to kind of test the waters. What is it that individuals want to see? What are some of the challenges that you are experiencing in your programs, in your communities? Are we doing what we set out and said that we would do? So now that we've gotten established, now it's time for us to kind of look forward, right? So we have this educational piece, but there's also some internal cleaning that we're going to have to do as far as data is related. So we can't really move forward with any initiatives until we have a clear idea and picture of what it is we want to accomplish. This is why data is so important. Data supports the why. Data tells us, okay, these are the areas that we're succeeding in. These are the areas that we have some opportunities in, and this is how we are going to adjust and move forward. A part of that looking forward is the addition of our new Chief Diversity Officer, that's Mr. Vic Armstrong, who has just come on board to really assist us as a company to hold true to what we say we're going to do. So I'm going to hand it over to him so he can give his own introduction and just really shed some light on where we're going as a council. Vic?
Yeah, thank you so much. And so much of what Akemie shared, I think, really captures the way I think about this. I think that there are a couple of things that come to mind for me right away. One is, and I've had a number of people ask me, what is your vision for DEI at RI? And it is kind of funny to me in a way when people ask me that, because my vision is just that. My vision is my vision. And what's going to be important is for us as an organization to decide what is RI's vision for who we want to be and how we want to show up in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So part of what I have to do is spend time talking to the folks that have been a part of this work, spend time talking to the folks who are doing the work every day, and really understand both from frontline workers and from senior leadership, really where is it that we want to be, where do we want to go with this? Because part of the DEI work is part art and part science. And the art of it is we have to decide as an organization, what is the story that we want to tell? who is it that we want people to see when they see RI? And then perhaps the more important part of that is, once we decide the story we want to tell, we have to make sure that the video matches the audio. So if we're saying this is who we are, we need to demonstrate that's who we are. And that's where a lot of the data comes in, because the data is what will hold us accountable. I'll also say this: I think that we can very easily fall in love with the concept of DEI, and part of the reason that we do that is because the diversity, equity, and inclusion, number one, it is very topical. It is very trendy. Everybody today wants to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I can tell you from having been involved in this at the state level, that everyone who talks about diversity, equity, and inclusion is not, in my opinion, actually doing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in part, it's because, at least from a corporate perspective, it is a relatively new concept. It is something that we are, in our organizations, still learning how to do, and how to marry the aspiration of DEI to the operation of DEI. And that's where a lot of the data comes in. And then one of the other challenges is that, honestly, and we can take a framework. I have a framework that I used at Department of Health and Human Services. You've got a framework that came from American Express, and we can take different frameworks from around the country. But at the end of the day, no two DEI programs are going to look exactly the same, because the mission and vision of the organizations are different, the makeup of the organization is different, the culture of the organization is different. And so all those things will be a part of us figuring out, as we move forward, how we really want to approach this DEI work. And there's a whole lot more I could say about it, but I will stop there.
Thank you, Vic. Thank you, Vic. So as he mentioned, the data is really the focus here as we move into our third year. Those key performance indicators, that information that says, yes, we're moving in the right direction. No, we need to make a shift. And so we need you all's input for that. When we reach out and say, hey, we want your feedback, we want your honest, no sugar coded feedback, because that's really the only way that we can make an honest change. DEI work, it is a heavy lift. I will always say it is a heavy lift, because we are wanting to get it into the DNA, like the smallest components of our company. And it's going to require us to work together as a team to do so. That also means all of the councils are also coming together to have this uniformed approach. So you have the MLC, the Medical Leadership Council, the PLC, the Peer Leadership Council, and we also have the DEILC. So we're coming together to gather this data, and that's where our SMART tool comes into play. And Dr. Browning is going to get into some details. If you are a program leader, I am just going to go ahead and throw this plug in there, because some of you will start seeing emails from me. If you are a state director, VP, or program leader, you'll see an email come from me over the next week or so, where we are starting to form these focus groups that will assist us in completing that SMART tool. And again, Dr. Browning will go into more depths as to what it is and why we are doing that. But do be on the lookout. Again, we're not operating in a silo here as these councils. Again, we are here to serve, and we can't do that without your input. So I'll go ahead and transition it over. I believe we have a word cloud that we might pop up on the screen, and then we'll let Dr. Browning get into the SMART tool. Thanks, Susan.
Could I say one more thing about the data before we transition? And that is, and really to just piggyback on what Akemie shared, because the data is what will hold us accountable. And it's extremely important that we are very transparent with our data, the good and the bad, to show where we are. And that is what holds us accountable. But it's also important that we think about data not only as quantitative, but also qualitative. Because oftentimes what happens is we can have the metrics that tell us that we are doing great. But when you talk to people on the ground, whether it's the people that we serve or teammates within the organization, their perception of how things are can look very different. And so you do have to have that balance, that combination of quantitative and qualitative data, because you want to know how it's resonating with the people that are impacted by the decisions that you're making.
And if I could jump in there also, Akemie and Vic, you guys made some wonderful points, and I was taking some notes because I wanted to ask some questions. So, Akemie, you mentioned, and this goes to what Vic, you were just saying about the importance of having the open communication and developing a collective vision, our vision. How do we start making sure that we can have that open communication? Because I'll be the scapegoat here. I've worked different places, and I know that there can be a lot of fear among people because, as Vic, you were saying, it can be something that's a hot button topic as far as DEI goes, but people don't actually always put it into practice like RI is trying to do. So a lot of people, I think, including myself, have had experiences in the past where we've been asked our opinions, but there's also this underlying non-verbalized feeling that, yes, we want your feedback, but we're looking for a certain type of feedback. How do we get beyond that and have open communication so that we can develop a vision?
So I'd say a couple of things there. One is I would use as an example some of what we faced in dealing with the COVID pandemic. When we looked at the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on Black and Brown communities, and we first started to roll out what from a DHHS perspective, a state perspective, or even the federal perspective, when we began to roll out what we thought were the things that we need to do to mitigate some of the challenges that we were seeing, people didn't respond immediately to the way that we were communicating, the things that we were communicating. And a lot of it was because of a lot of the historical damage that had been done in relationships and things that where people had trusted and then found out that it was that what they got was not really what they had anticipated, much like what you're saying. And so I think a part of it is, and as a part of that whole equity strategic framework, is that one of the linchpins of it is going to be earning and sustaining trust. And part of earning and sustaining trust is recognizing that there are a lot of reasons that that trust does not exist, and being willing to listen to and hear about those historical things that have caused people not to trust. And that means that we have to have honest communication with very accurate information. Some of it will involve things like focus groups. Dr. Browning can talk about the SMART tool, and I think that'll be one of the things that will help us gather a lot of that information. But you also have to create space for people to have conversations. And I know in other places I've worked in the past, we've done what we call, and we're in a little bit different time now because so much is virtual, but we've done what we call let's talk sessions, where you just bring people into a space, put chairs in a circle, and you strip off the titles and you just have open communication about whatever is going on. And a lot of it is talking about what's in the ground of wherever you are. What brought us to this place? What is it that we don't talk about? What is it that we're all walking on, but we don't talk about? And allowing people to have those conversations and share that kind of feedback. And you can learn a lot about what is resonating with people and what is not, but you're also building that trust that people can say, okay, this does feel different because now I'm able to share without retaliation. I'm able to share without someone telling me that my opinions don't matter. And what you do by creating that space is you begin to form partnerships with people. And those partnerships build relationships so that then it does become a shared vision and does become a shared purpose that we're all working toward building that diversity, equity, and inclusion. But part of it also is being very clear about what DEI is and what DEI is not. DEI is not the complaint department. DEI is really about creating a place where we can have an active sense of belonging for all of our teammates. And that involves us really co-creating solutions and coming together to decide collectively what that looks like and how do we demonstrate that and how do we communicate that, and then being able to quantify what are the things that we need to do to be able to demonstrate that we're doing that and that we're doing it consistently. I do have some thoughts about, what that needs to look like in terms of the resources that we put into it. But that's maybe a conversation for another day. But we do have to be very intentional about our DEI work if we really expect to get results. I think I have an 8-year-old creeping up behind me if you see someone in the camera.
No problem, Vic.
He's right.
Okay. Thank you.
I agree, Vic. And one of the things that we're doing, team, to kind of foster creating that atmosphere, because it's all about the atmosphere. Having a conversation be the right time or the wrong time is making sure that it is occurring in an atmosphere that is receptive, that everyone understands that this is a safe place, and that we want to hear your voice. We want to hear your thoughts and concerns. And one of the ways that we have started to incorporate that is our network groups. So currently we have two, one fully functioning ERG, employee resource group, and that's our LGBTQIA+. And I've had the privilege of being able to sit in on some of those meetings, not as a oversight to the DEI, but as someone who was just interested in learning more and voicing concerns and wanting to make sure I'm saying the right things and I'm being the appropriate ally and that I'm knowledgeable and just opening my own perspective. And those conversations are so helpful. And everyone, I assure you, gives honest and open feedback about what they would like to see, the things that they're not happy with, how we can brainstorm solutions. That is an active group comprised of employees, individuals from all levels of the organization. We now have another ERG that is about to stand up. It is our Women's in Leadership group that will be headed by Amy Pugsley and Georgia Madera. That will have that same concept. So for anyone that is interested, if there's something that is just pressed upon your heart, a topic, an interest that you feel like others would rally around because they want to learn more, they have concerns, by all means, submit an application for a network group or an employee resource group. I know another thing that we're kind of discussing is how can we ensure that there is some sort of representation of DEI in every facility, in all of our programs, inpatient and outpatient. What does that look like? Is that having an actual DEI member or representative that kind of help facilitate those conversations on the ground, that is able to filter information up? Like if in a certain program they're really struggling connecting with the demographic, that they can kind of troubleshoot that to the DEI as a whole, and then we either come on the ground and assist you or provide you tools and resources. These are all of the things that are in the works, and we're trying to figure out how to do it. Team, we don't have the answers to everything, which is why we need your feedback. That is, we want it. We want it all. Dr. Browning, did you have any feedback or questions? And these are great questions, Susan.
Yes, and Dr. Browning actually put a question in the chat box. He was asking, is it fair to say that when Vic was speaking, that it's a macro version of what we try to do for those we serve in crisis from a trauma-informed care practice, creating a safe place to develop trust so that communication and conversations can occur? And Vic responded, absolutely. And I didn't know if either one of you wanted to expand out more on that.
That's exactly what it is. It is treating everyone. I think the concept or the actions of DEILC can sometimes be so simple that we make them overly complex as far as it comes to human connection. It is really just saying, hey, individual that is different from me, that is approaching the world from their own lived experiences, perspectives, and saying, hey, I honor you and I'm here for it. I want to learn. It's not my job to dictate what you do and how you do it, but I'm sure there's something you can teach me. We are not the same individuals, so there's always something we can teach each other. We can advocate for each other, and by advocating for each other, it kind of spills over into the work that we do. The only way to learn more about someone, the only way to understand how a person is thinking is to talk to them. People only tell you or show you what they want to tell or show you. And they will only go to the deepest levels of themselves to kind of peel back some things when they're comfortable. And so I think we are still in that phase of the company of making it comfortable for individuals to be their authentic, genuine selves.
Yeah, and part of it is the same way that we think about the people that we serve. It is recognizing that there's intersectionality in everything. None of us are all one thing, and really bringing that perspective into the workplace. And to Akemie's point earlier, that for a lot of folks, when they think about DEI work, they think about race and ethnicity, and it is so much bigger than that. When you think about historically marginalized communities, one of the things that brought me to this DEI space was advocating for people with lived mental health experience as being historically marginalized. And having been born and raised in a very rural town in Eastern North Carolina, recognizing that people in rural communities are often historically marginalized. And it's recognizing that all of those things come into play when we start talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and everyone having their own unique experience and bringing that experience to the workplace. But one of the things that I often share when I do presentations around the country is that I think of people as having come to where they are, and they're forming their perception based on two things. One being your disposition, that kind of those innate qualities you're born with. Like some of us are more introverted, some are more extroverted, some are more outgoing, some more high strung than others. So that's a part of what shapes you. But the other part is your lived experience, and none of us have the same lived experience. But there are things that we have learned, and things we've been taught, things we've been socialized to see. And we see things from that lens. But we come together and have collective conversation, and we begin to look at not just to look at our beliefs, but to look at how our beliefs impact other people, to look at how our interaction impacts other people, to think about things from another person's perspective. Then we begin to have a collective vision then for where we want to go with DEI. And then also thinking about, we often talk about the lens of equity. And I like to refer to it as more the voice of equity, because when you talk about the lens of equity, if you're trying to see things through my lens, your vision is going to be distorted because you're still going to filter it through your own lens. But the voice of equity means letting people tell their own stories and letting people talk about what's important to them, letting people give us feedback on what is important to them that we need to measure and that we need to be looking at in terms of how we're progressing on this journey. And then the final thing I'll say, and it kind of goes back to my point earlier about, DEI aspirationally is easy, but it is hard. I mean, doing this work is hard, and it's hard for a number of reasons. One is because you're talking about embedding equity in an inequitable system. The system has never been equitable, and so to now say we're going to embed equity in an inequitable system is difficult. The other thing is that there's so much about the DEI work that can become a nice to have. It can become an add-on, as opposed to really thinking about this as being essential to the work that we do. And when other things can easily become priority, it is oftentimes the data that's going to keep us driving forward and focus on the task at hand, because you can easily get diverted when IT is struggling or HR is struggling. DEI is going to seem like it should be on the back burner, but it's the data and it's the commitment to the work that's going to keep us moving forward.
Thank you both. Those are great comments, and I really appreciate it. This is a very good conversation. I'm excited about where we are and where we're going. I don't want to delay any further, Dr. Chuck. So Dr. Browning, we would love to hear about the SMART tool. Or am I getting ahead of myself? Do we have our poll that we want to do first? Yeah.
I keep hoping while the time goes before I have to speak, that the folks that are doing a lot of weed eating and taking down bushes outside are going to calm down. That's why I've got my headphones on, because it's so loud in the background.
No problem. Well, Dr. Browning, thank you so much for joining us. We know you're a busy man, just like Ms. Akemie and Vic, but you're going to tell us more about the data, the SMART tool. Those of us who've worked in recovery or substance use field know the SMART acronym typically refers to a certain type of recovery group model that's outside of just the AANA lens. But we're not talking about that, are we? What are we talking about when we talk about SMART tool?
Yeah, it definitely stands for something different in this case. And I was really familiar with that too, Susan, with the SMART measurements and things like that as well. So this is a tool that was designed by the American Association of Community Psychiatry in 2020 as a response to, they do a lot of different public announcements and advocacy for different things, and they wanted to make a statement about that. Now, especially was related to intersection of mental health and law enforcement, and they created this tool called the Self-Modification of Anti-Racism tool. And the goal of the tool was to create a system, and it actually was originally designed for community behavioral health systems, because that's what they mainly are made up of in terms of the physicians that are parts of that group. However, it is recommended to consider to use parts of it or to modify parts of it to be able to achieve the concepts of it, which is really just, can an organization have a toolkit that helps them take a look at what they're doing in different domains of their organization to assess and modify things that are, that help them improve towards a more anti-racism or, as Vic said, equity lens to be able to work towards that. And I was reviewing the tool. I've always been a fan of tools like this, whether it's the Zero Suicide Toolkit, which we use at RI to help drive a lot of our suicide prevention pathways. Our PLC and Lisa St. George, we worked on developing an organizational tool for peer poweredness for people to use to be able to do the same kind of method. And so seeing this tool, I thought it was really interesting. And brought it to the DEI, and we've been taking a look at it and felt like it was something that made a lot of sense for us to consider using it. So it's in its beginnings, and they're open for feedback and really are excited as a group that RI is participating in using this tool to measure. And so if you think about it, what it does is it's got a rating scale of scores 1 through 5 of how far along you are on a spectrum of using different things in these different domains. So some of the categories are like hiring, recruitment, retention, and promotion. So it's a lot of HR information that looks at what is your company doing to measure, and the data measuring relating to affecting, are you measuring out racial differences and looking for potential inequities in the way you hire, recruit, retain, promote people, pay people, things like that. Clinical care was really interesting to me because that's in my realm, which is it's a lot of different measuring points on things that we know happen in mental health and behavioral health that are so applicable to what we could be doing, which is to be able to measure how different, in this case, it's for race, but it's something we need to be doing at all groups, going back to the DEI part to look at how we're supporting. And it's things like measuring engagement, measuring prescribing practices based on race, measuring diagnosis patterns, measuring connection to resources in one group versus the other in terms of follow-up plans that are made, actually looking at timing. How quickly do you see someone who's Black versus someone that's white in your door-to-doc time? Is there differences in that? So these are the kinds of things that it pushes you to look at as an organization, to, like Vic said, to really look at the data. And you might have a view that you are saying you want to have this approach, but when you look at the data, you really know. And so until we do that, it's hard to say where we are. And I've always been a fan in my sports background of watching practice tape and getting graded in games and watching your videos in games to see what you did well and what you didn't do well. And if it's done in the right environment where you can grow from it and learn, and it's not such a fear of blame or I'm doing this wrong, we're going to score really poorly in some of these categories because we're not even measuring those things yet. But that's okay, because the tool encourages us to make plans as an organization to drive and improve, to be able to own that data and use it towards quality improvement there. So workplace culture, actually, a lot of the questions in that, our DEI LC has spent a lot of work the past 2 years in many of those questions in making change in our organization. And then community advocacy is how you connect with people in your community. And a lot of the stuff that we do with law enforcement and connections with No Wrong Door fits, we're the right target on some of those categories there. And then population health outcomes, again, goes back to just having the infrastructure to have that. So one of the first things that we're doing, just to catch you up on what's happening with the tool, we've got a smaller work group of different folks. This has been a really great joint work together with the PLC, the DEILC, and the MLC to work towards being able to score ourselves on this tool. And so like there's different groups. HR has got to participate to help us with HR information. The MLC is helping to come up with some of the clinical data and what we're doing or not doing in these clinical domains. And so we've got to score that. But we also have this survey that's going to go out so that any staff person can talk about how they feel about workplace culture or hiring or retention practices that they experience, so that we're going to get hopefully a broad spectrum of opinion of how they feel we're doing at RI in relation to this. So it's going to be important for those on this call to help talk up the importance of why it's important to take a very short amount of time to give your voice and opinion of what matters with this, because we're going to use this tool and it's something that is designed to drive forward change and then to reassess yourself every 6 months as you move forward in doing that. So I'm really excited about what it could do for us, because it's not something we've ever really had the infrastructure to measure. And then the last most important thing is going to be, it's going to drive us to start working towards collecting better data in general, because one of the things we don't do the best in our electronic health record is collect demographics. And so it's going to be hard to know how we're doing with different demographic groups if we don't really collect that data, so that we can then cross compare and look at how well we're engaging with people, how well we're supporting people. This is really, we serve a lot of people across the country, and it's really valuable data to help figure out what works and what doesn't work in supporting people in their care. So I'm super excited about us being able to use this tool in the long run and move forward as a structure. It's not the end all be all, it's just a piece of many things that we'll be doing, but I hope that makes sense as a description. So if I didn't cover it well, if there's other questions, I'd love to be able to answer any if people have them.
Well, we do have a question, Dr. Browning. Thank you so much for introducing us, some of us with understanding for the first time what this is. Karen asks, is there a time frame on when we'll see the questions come out?
Do you have that answer, Akemie, on when the survey is going to go out? Okay.
So we wanted to wait until everything had closed out with performance reviews, just to make sure that we weren't pounding people with additional work and things to kind of keep up within their email. The goal is for all of the questions to go out by the 3rd week of July. So I'm in the process now. So I've reached out to HR to make sure they have their focus group. Vic and I are working with DEILC to do our portion, as well as take pieces of that survey as far as the workplace culture. Those are the ones that are going to go out to the entire organization to make sure that we're getting, again, honest feedback. We're not operating in a silo, so making sure we get everyone's feedback. And then the questions with regards to community advocacy, population health outcomes and evaluation, that's where you'll see the email come from myself as far as going to the VPs, the state leaders and program leadership. I need you all to identify at least one person in all of your programs, inpatient and outpatient, to kind of come together and answer these questions. Those individuals would have the most knowledge with regards to, are we meeting the needs of our communities or not? Like, what are the outcomes? So by the 3rd week of July, those questions should have gone out to the designated parties.
Perfect. And I was thinking too, this looks like it's going to be a very effective and impactful tool. But it has this sense with it that when we roll it out and we do it and we're asking all the questions, when we get the results, it may be a bit like pulling back the veil on things, because we all have perceptions, and we might perceive that we're all doing a wonderful job and there's no discrepancies, and everybody's being treated equally, and we want everybody to be treated equally and equitably. In our minds, we may think we are, but this may reveal that there are areas that we need to focus on, to change, to completely overhaul, or to tweak. And I imagine responses to that data can be varied. How do we make sure that people are receptive to the data, and that we can get everybody on board that the data is a reality and this is where we are? There's no judgment, but there is a call to move forward and to go better. How do we do that? How do we make sure everybody understands the impact and the point of this, so they're receptive of the message?
So first of all, you're never going to get 100% of the people on board. So there will always be people who won't be. It does not negate the fact that this is work that we need to do. And we fully anticipate that some of what we will see will not cast us in a very good light. And that is not to say that RI is a bad organization, but that is to say, again, that we have an inequitable system. And it's a system that we have all been operating in. What this does do is it gives us a place to start. But we also recognize that this is one tool. This is not going to solve all of our ills and tell us all the things that we need to do. But this is one tool that gives us a place to start. And one of the ways that you get buy-in is you have to over communicate. You have to share with people what is going on. You have to talk about what we see, and you have to give people space to react to it. And there will be folks that will look at it and say, I knew it. Well, that's going to happen because there will be things where people will see when that veil is pulled back, that there are things that we really, really need to focus on, some things that we really need to work on. But this gives us a place to start. One of the other things that I also want people to think about is even when we get this information and when we start to collect data and measure things, one of the things that's always important to think about is what is it that the data does not tell us? What are the things that we still need to know that the data does not tell us that we need to begin to measure that we haven't measured? And then also, a lot of it to me, even with this tool, is going to go back to what is the story that we want to tell with the data, because data can tell you a lot of different things depending on the questions that you ask. One of the examples I always give is that, we will hear in political settings, we'll hear things like when the Midwest is doing well, America is doing well. When small businesses do well, America is doing well. When coal miners do well, America does well. But that same data would tell you that when Black people do well, America does well. When Hispanic people do well, America does well. When women do well, America does well. But that's not the story that we try to tell. So we interpret the data differently. And so what this will also give us an opportunity to do is to ask different questions, to interpret data differently and look at the things that we are not measuring. And if we want to know something, how do we then apply the data to help us find out the things that we want to know and the areas that we need to lean into more effectively?
Wonderful. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, I was typing it all in the chat, but since you're done, because everyone's probably reading the chat. So just for confirmation, so we have Gallup that's about to come out. We don't want overlapping things because that can be very overwhelming. Thank you, Karen, for reminding me. So we will do the survey that goes out to all staff. So that workplace culture will be August 1st. That's a Monday. But program leaders, VP, state directors, we are still going to have our meeting in the month of July. So it's where myself and actually Matthew Holtzclaw with MLC will come together with those that have been selected from your programs and kind of moderate those questions. We'll get your answers and your feedback, and then we'll take those results to a larger conversation between the three different councils. So we're kind of splitting it out some, but just keep by your email and I'll be sure to keep everyone updated. Thank you. Sorry.
That's great. Thank you, Akemie.
You're welcome.
So why don't we now move to our word cloud, Karen? We have a word cloud where everyone in the audience can participate and anonymously give their answer. The question that we have for you is, where would you like to see the DEILC and RI grow in terms of DEI concepts? And you can vote. If you look in the chat box, you can vote. Karen has put the link to that word cloud. There you go. And you can enter in what your responses are. Diverse leaders, yeah. I'm going to pop on and put something from me too. Let's see here. Cultural exposure, language groups. Getting some ideas here, Akemie. Mentorship, opportunity, yeah. Diversity. Cultural competence. Empowerment.
Susan, am I able to ask a question?
Absolutely.
I would like to get as deep as I possibly can to make sure I'm understanding what folks are truly wanting to see. So for the individual that put in diversity, because that can cover a broad spectrum of topics, my assumption is deep, deep, deep down in your most innards of innards, there's a particular part of diversity you're probably wanting to focus on. Do you mind just going back into it and just adding that? We are really wanting to get as close to what you all want to see as possible. This is a safe space, a judgment-free space, but really just asking you, what do you want to see? How can we serve you better?
So, and you don't have to say who you are, but if you will go back into the Menti link, and if you were the one that put in diversity, what if you could give us just a little bit more about what you mean by diversity? What's your concept about that? So that we can understand. We got some more things at refugee health, cultural immersion, hearing every voice, supports, relatability, cultural days. That sounds like fun. Preceptorship. Got a couple things for mentoring and mentorship. So there's a theme there, Akemie. We'll take another minute for people to weigh in. I think we have a great base here of information that we can take. There's some things on here I wouldn't have thought of and haven't thought about being able to incorporate into our work climate. And it looks like we've got some work ahead of us, everybody. And anybody have any thoughts? Akemie, Dr. Browning, Vic, on some of the things you're seeing here?
Yeah, I think there's not a lot that shocks me. I think the challenge though is how do you get there from here, and those are the things that we'll have to really focus on and lean into, because when you talk about even diverse leaders, first of all, you have to put a process in place to make sure that we're ensuring that we do get more diversity among our leadership. But then we also, we have to define what that means, diversity in what sense? Because the thing that people see when they look at a website is race and ethnicity. But there are other kinds of diversity. There's diversity in sexual orientation and gender. There's diversity in age. So part of our challenge also will be to define what we mean when we talk about diversity, when we talk about equity. And then the other thing is, I think that there's a difference also in looking at what do we need to do internally and what do we need to do externally? What should we be putting out into the community, and what should the experience be like for people who are coming in to utilize our services? But then there's also what does that look like for people who are a part of the RI family, and making sure that we're speaking the same language. Because one of the things I think that, and this is, when we talk about what is my vision, one of the things that I think that we need is, we really need a DEI toolkit, something that says this is what DEI is, this is what we mean, this is where we're going, this is our vision, this is how our vision aligns with the organization's vision. And we have a lot of that already. We've got the building blocks of a lot of that. But I think there are ways that we need to just kind of flesh it out so that people can see it and be very clear about where we're going, because the first part of it is what's the story you want to tell. The second part is how do you get other people to tell the story for you? And when other people start telling the story for you, that's when you know you're getting it right. When how you see yourself is the way that other people see you.
That's beautiful. I love that. And we've got some great comments in the chat. Lynn was saying education on mental illness, substance abuse, and recovery. Not everyone knows what this looks like. And I think that's a great point, because even though we're RI International and we're helping individuals who struggle with mental illness, substance use, and a variety of challenges with social determinants of health, maybe we don't always know what the recovery looks like, or every presentation of what we need to look for to help an individual.
Yeah.
And then,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Vic.
I was going to say, too, and it kind of goes back to the internal versus external. And then, some of the conversation earlier about, people come from communities. And so when people come into the workspace, they bring all their experience with them. And so we also do have to think about things like communication equity. Our people, we have interpreters, but are we doing everything that we need to do to make sure that for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, or people who are visually impaired, are we doing the things that we need to do to make sure they have access to resources? Are we thinking about environmental equity? The people that come to work for us, are they coming from environments where there's heavier pollution? I know I was a part of a conversation about 2-3 weeks ago here in Charlotte, and we were talking with some of the city planners, and they had a map that showed in the Black and Brown communities, those are areas throughout Mecklenburg County where it is easier to get permits to do things that pollute. So it's easier in those areas to get around some of the pollution laws. And part of it is because it's supposedly because it's less densely populated, but when you look at it, it's really not. It's just more heavily populated with Black and Brown people. So, thinking about those kind of things, thinking about our vendor diversity, the people that we do business with, do they have principles and practices around diversity, equity, and inclusion? And all those are things that we need to think about if we are really going to be serious about planting our flag in the ground and saying, this is what we stand for.
Very good. That's a broad way to look at it. I really like that, expanding the understanding of what we need to consider when we really want to put into a permanent piece of our own hearts the DEI LC mission, and not let it just be lip service or just jumping on the bandwagon, but making it a heart passion. Lisa St. George shares that understanding specific risks for suicide within the communities of LGBTQ is important. Greater understanding of people with various disabilities and how they need care and behavioral health services. Absolutely. Community impact is important, and people base their expectations on what they have experienced. Absolutely. Got a lot of great conversation pieces here, a lot of great feedback. I'm loving it. As we are moving toward the end of this conversations, at least for the month of June, I have a question here, and it has been spoken to a little bit, but just kind of tying it all together. How can we move forward? Vic, Akemie, Dr. Browning, with moving beyond, as Vic said, being in love with the concept and making it a permanent heartbeat. How do we do that?
Yeah, for me, it's what we have to do is simple, but how we get there is not. We have to do the work. It's one thing to say that we want to be about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but if we're going to get there, we've got to do the work. That means having hard conversations. That means sometimes being willing to let, whether it's people in the community or staff here in the organization, for senior leaders to be willing to sit down and let people tell them, this is how you failed us. These are the things that have been done wrong in the past, and these are the things that need to change. And those things are challenging because it is very, very difficult to hear that you've missed the mark and that you failed. But if we want to get past this point, that's what we have to do. And I think a lot of it again comes back to the data. We've got to decide what do we want to do, and then how do we measure it to make sure that we get there. And I think, and I say this all the time, I think that in every decision that we make, in every policy that we make, and I think this is the mindset that we have to take, is that because we have an inequitable system, then with every decision that we make and every policy that we set, every rule that we make, we are either leaning into equity because we're challenging an inequitable system, or we're perpetuating inequity. If we do what we've always done, we are perpetuating inequity. And the way that we have to change that is with every decision, we have to think about who can be disparately impacted by whatever decision that we make, by whatever policy we put in place. How do we incorporate that voice to make sure that we are speaking to the needs of that group that's being disparately impacted? And then how do we measure that we're actually accomplishing what we set out to do, and that it's working? And that again includes both quantitative and qualitative feedback to make sure that we are doing what we said that we were going to do.
I think from my perspective, and I'm agreeing with everything that Vic is saying, but I think it is twofold. So they're the things that we are working up towards, right? To kind of take off running with as we're moving forward. And there's that low-hanging fruit. So I'm going to speak to the low-hanging fruit part. So as service providers, those of you on the front lines, you're working these 12-hour shifts, you're out in the community, how do we foster this environment of inclusivity, of equity, of diversity? And it really starts with, what do you see when you see people? What is the first thing that you are noticing about your peers that you work with, about the community individuals that come into your programs? Do you have these possibly preset notions of, oh, they're going to be difficult because they have a mental health diagnosis, or, oh, they're on opiates, so they're going to wild out on the unit? Or are we seeing people for what they need and not what we expect that are based off unrealistic expectations? Making sure that we are self-aware. To be truly DEI is a enlightening self-finding process where you have to be so self-aware and in tune with yourself that the moment you have a thought of, ooh, this could create a barrier to care, this is Akemie, this is not what I'm intending to do, let me set that to the side so I can ensure that I'm connecting with this person the way I need to, so they can get the care that they need, not the care that I think they need, because it's not about you. It's about them. Making sure that they are getting the care that they came in here to receive. And am I able to put Akemie to the side to fulfill that need? That is one of the biggest things we can do as frontline workers, working with our coworkers. Same thing with your coworkers. We work these 12-hour shifts, 100%, and this is something that I tell my staff all the time. They probably get sick of me saying it. Carrying compassion and grace. People encounter so much on a daily basis. You have no idea what impacted Tom before he came into work. And Tom's 100% today might look completely different than his 100% yesterday. Are we able to meet Tom where he is, connect with Tom as a human and say, oh, Tom, you okay? You good? You looking a little off today? Don't worry about it, Tom, I got you. We're gonna lift you up. If you need to take a moment, you take a moment, versus what sometimes we have a tendency to do. Oh, Tom's in a bad mood. I ain't got time. I ain't got time for Tom today. Nobody got time. Tom, we got too much work going on. Tom, we can't do with your attitude today. Tom has something going on. Tom is a human before he is an employee. We are all humans before we are anything else. And we carry around expectations based on what we have experienced. If we want individuals to carry that grace and compassion for us, we have to do it for everyone we encounter in and outside of the job. That is really the quickest way to kind of sow that seed. We're not responsible for the growth of that seed, but we are responsible for planting those seeds.
Yeah.
Powerful words.
One thing I would say too is this work is not for the faint of heart. So you don't really get to where we need to be without breaking a few eggs and without hurting some feelings, because there will be people who will have to come along kicking and screaming, and there will be people who will have their feelings hurt when they believe that they have been the most open-minded, thoughtful person in the world, but then find out that some of the things that we've done and some of the things that we've said have been hurtful, and have really hindered our DEI growth. And so part of this will be having some very difficult conversations and challenging some longstanding beliefs. And some of it does mean that we have to think differently about how we slice the pie. And that's just the reality of it. And if we're not willing to make those kind of sacrifices, then we will not be successful in this journey.
Great comments. Dr. Browning, any final words from you?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. And when you look at where we are, celebrating our 2-year anniversary, and you look at where we've come from and the things that we've done, and you look at where we can go. One of the things that I'm really excited about is putting all this into even a more defined action, because I've seen that success move other initiatives of ours forward when we give it the power that it needs. And so our Chief Operation Officer, Ruchi, always talks about a triangle of people, processes, and systems. And then if you have all those three things in place working together, you're going to be more likely to be more successful with something. And so, we have people that are volunteered to participate in the DEI. We now have Vic as a really important person to help us with all of his experience to move initiatives and things forward, but we actually still need more. So a call to action is we need more representation, more voice, more participation from the whole company, and from different job roles and things like that too, to give voice and help share that lens in all that we do. We're putting in systems to help look at measuring data and things like that. So Smart Tool is just one of those. We're putting in things like that. And then the people using that to monitor things will allow us to adjust our processes, hopefully to improve and have a more equitable process in everything that we do that we've been talking about. So I really look forward to seeing that nailed down and being more in place, so that we can constantly work that triangle of improving through that lens, because it's just something that works in lots of different arenas when you use it, and we've got the pieces coming in place to do that. It's easier, like I said in that quote, it is simple to do those 3 things, but it's not easy. And so having those things in place and working together is pretty exciting for me coming out of year 2.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I do want to remind everyone who joined and participated, we do have a conversations survey that's going to be sent out. Please do. It's very short, very easy. Take a couple minutes to let us know what was helpful, maybe what wasn't helpful, how we can improve, and how things that we can continue doing to make these conversations meaningful and equitable and engaging. And don't be afraid to give us information on that. It is anonymous, so just let us know. Akemie, Vic, Dr. Browning, thank you so much for being our special guests at this 2nd year celebration for DEILC. I'm very, very thrilled that we have this and where we are today. I'm really excited about where we're headed and the leadership that we have that's going to propel us forward. And I look forward to hearing from all of my colleagues and staff members on how we can continue to move forward and do better.
Just a quick note, the survey is actually at the end of the Zoom, not to be sent out later. So when you end your meeting, instead of seeing the Zoom, how was your meeting? It's going to show you the survey. So please take a moment just to fill it out right then, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Karen. Karen keeps me straight. I tell you, I need Karen like every day of my life.
Karen keeps everybody straight.
She's got a big job. Thank you, everybody. Let us know your feedback and have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks,
Happy
Susan.
4th.
Happy 4th. Bye.
Happy 4th.